Hello, I'm Dr. Tara Palmatier of shrinkformen.com. If you have a question or would like to schedule a session with me, you can email me at shrinkformen@gmail.com. The topic of today's video is what's the difference between love bombing and genuine admiration? Love bombing is a seduction technique that occurs during the idealization stage of relationships with narcissists, psychopaths, histrionics, borderlines, and other personality disordered abusers. Predators love bomb in order to foster an emotional and psychological dependency in their targets. In other words, you become dependent upon and allow the narcissist to determine your sense of self-worth. Love bombing is not a new concept. It's a term borrowed from the study of cults and how they recruit members. Emotional predators like narcissists and psychopaths use the technique for similar reasons, primarily to develop a fast intimacy, affection, and bond. Drugging you with flattery is not just an expression. Victims of love bombing typically experience a high from the intense adoration, hyperattention, and flattery. Love bombing, especially for codependents, is the fast lane to easy and illusory self-esteem. It's the high of the love bombing during the idealization stage that victims of narcissistic abuse yearn to return to once the devaluation stage begins. You don't miss the reality of the borderline or narcissist. You miss the person they pretended to be when love bombing you. When abuse victims say they want the narcissist or borderline to get help, what they really mean is that they want them to go back to being the fantasy woman or man they pretended to be when seducing you. There's no going back, though. Even if the borderline or narcissist were to seek treatment and make some improvements, they're not going to become the love bomber again because that person never existed in the first place. Many people who've been in one or more of these toxic relationships legitimately worry about becoming involved with another disordered abuser again. In an effort to make sure that doesn't happen, they spend a lot of time trying to identify red flags. While that's important, it's equally important to focus on what makes you vulnerable to abusers and other predatory con artists. It's usually a combination of low self-esteem, insecurity, and learning from an early age that your value is in taking care of others while denying your own feelings and needs. Codependence can be easily manipulated through flattery and affection, or by withholding flattery and affection. For that matter, so can narcissists and other abusers. One big difference is that narcissists expect their victims to continue worshiping and flattering them while they actively devalue and mistreat you. This isn't true of codependents, at least not usually. Codependents typically love harder, some of you may get that reference, once the narcissist begins the devaluation and abuse in earnest. People with a solid sense of self generally aren't vulnerable to the false flattery of narcissists and other predators. How do you tell the difference between genuine admiration and appreciation and the false flattery of love bombing? Think about the people you admire and hold in high regard. Did that happen overnight? Or did your appreciation develop over time as you got to know them and observed them consistently behaving with kindness, compassion, integrity, and intelligence? Anyone who lays the flattery on thick and fast typically has an agenda. They're most likely looking to manipulate you into something that is not good for you. When I hear the term buttering you up, I chuckle because it makes me think of lubricant, as in bend over and apply the lubricant. Well, that's if you're lucky. The following behaviors are characteristics of love bombing. They are also standalone red flags. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are the most common in my experience. First, fostering a false sense of urgency. Look, it's hard work pretending to be someone you're not. Thus, love bombers often try to hurry the relationship along at a breakneck pace in order to secure the attachment. Once that's accomplished, typically after legally binding yourself to them through marriage, shared property, children, or a business partnership, the mask comes off. In the many accounts of love bombing to which I've been privy, there's frequently pressure to take things to the next level. They ABC to ABC. Always be conning to always be closing. Second, future faking. Narcissists and other abusers will often casually talk about marriage, having children, and other relationship milestones early on, or long before any reasonable person would seriously consider such things. It's part manipulation and part distraction tactic. If you're codependent, finding someone who seems to think you're so special, special enough to consider huge commitments so quickly, can make your heart melt along with your judgment and reason. It's used as a distraction should you catch a glimpse of the real them before they're ready, or as a way to keep your hope alive after the devaluation stage begins, but before they're ready to discard you. Third, hyperbole. Always and never, black and white, and all or nothing thinking are common in disordered people. They tend to excessively use words like love, hate, forever, and soulmate without having any real understanding of what these words mean. Particularly, that they're not to be used lightly, carelessly, and so quickly in a new relationship. And there's the one-itis. Love bombers often have a fixation on the one, more so than emotionally mature, non-disordered people. Narcissists and borderlines also tend to have had multiple the ones. Perhaps in their case, it would be more accurate to call it the 6 or the 18th. I see this as more evidence of their emotional immaturity. It's forever junior high. Then, tales of victimhood. Narcissists, borderlines, and other abusive personalities often, but not always, claim to have been victimized by their exes, friends, and families of origin. Maybe it's true, maybe it isn't. You'll probably never know for certain. Even if they really were abused, it explains their behavior. It does not excuse it. Be wary of people who tell you their tales of victimization very early on. It could be a boundary issue, attention seeking, and or they're trying to elicit sympathy or rescuer impulses within you in order to manipulate you. The magic mirror. Mirroring is something healthy people do too. It helps build rapport and attunement in a relationship. When love bombers mirror, it's usually a lie. They pretend to enjoy the same hobbies and share the same beliefs, feelings, and values in order to trick you into trusting and loving them. Many of the common values and interests magically come to an end after the love bombing stops and the mask comes off. Ingratiation. Love bombers often try to ingratiate themselves into your family and circle of friends. They suck up, flatter, and bend over backwards to inveigle their way into everyone's good graces. If your friends are healthier than you may hear a few "what the" comments. They do this to seek allies to be better able to manipulate and control you. If your friends and family solidly continue to have your back rather than join the narcissist's flying monkey squadron, the narcissist will eventually demand that you end these relationships, which they may do anyway, even if your family continues to be nice to them, because abusers isolate their victims. It's easier to control you if you are separated from the people who love and care about you. Being joined at the hip. Love bombers often want to spend every waking minute with you, especially during the beginning of the relationship. They require an extreme amount of attention and become upset when you can't accommodate this. Do not confuse this for an indicator of someone who loves and wants you so much they can't stand to be parted from you. Emotionally stable and mature adults can handle time apart. They don't need to text you 80 times during the day. In fact, healthy adults even think it's a sign of a strong relationship to be able to tolerate and enjoy time apart. Indispensability. Many love bombers, the personality disordered, and the codependent try to make themselves indispensable. It's basically a way to stave off abandonment fears and create a mutual dependency. In other words, if you need me, you won't leave me. Codependents continue to do this after the love bombing stage ends. Narcissists stop and then hold the things they once did for you over your head and expect to be repaid with interest compounded hourly. Being obsessed with your exes. An obsession with exes is common for codependents and disordered people. Codependents usually become obsessed because the narcissist or borderline triangulates by deliberately trying to make their partners insecure and jealous by bringing up past relationships and comparing the current partner to former partners. The personality disordered are usually obsessed with exes because even past relationships are seen as acts of disloyalty and threats to their control. True story, I've had many clients whose narcissistic or borderline girlfriends or wives are jealous of and consider relationships that predated them. That is, my clients didn't even know the borderline or the narcissist yet, that their old relationships were forms of cheating. It's crazy. Where was I? Oh, yes. The personality disordered are usually obsessed with exes because even past relationships are seen as acts of disloyalty and threats to their control. It's not uncommon for narcissists, borderlines, psychopaths, and other forms of crazy to stalk and harass your ex-partners. Again, this is more than a case of them being insecure. If someone you are dating is doing this, do not ignore it. This is a huge honking red flag. Get away from them. Then there's the sex bomb. Love bombing can also include lots and lots of sex or the future promise of the most amazing sex you'll ever experience after you prove yourself. That rarely comes to pass. People who use sex to manipulate are transactional. You will pay to play, and once you're hooked, the stakes become very steep. If these characteristics seem like normal courtship behavior to you, that's a problem. These behaviors are neither normal nor healthy. You might benefit from counseling to understand your unhealthy relationship patterns and why you're vulnerable to these kinds of relationship predators and con artists. Again, I'm Dr. Tara Palmatier of shrinkformen.com. If you'd like to ask a question or schedule a session with me, you can reach me at shrinkformen@gmail.com. Thanks for watching and have a good day.